gang, welcome back. So this is a little bit different than some of the other tutorials. This is going to be a bit longer. This is actually a project tutorial. What we're going to end up making is this alien landscape. So there's two different ways we can do this. In the downloads for this video, if you don't want to make the brush and you just want to go right on ahead and start, you can download the PNG and skip about 7 minutes in. If you decide that you want to make the brush, I'm going to be spending the first 5 minutes showing you how to make the brush using the flame. So let's go ahead and get started. So very first thing we're going to do, we're going to come and we're going to create a new document. We're going to be working in the web persona, and we're going to go 1000 by 1000. I like to keep all my brushes square. All right, we'll bring that up. Perfect. New document. We're in the draw persona. Now we're going to place. And if you look at the downloads, I put it in right here. And if you want to make the brush, there's a source image from pexels.com in there. Now we're going to click and hold to drag. And then I'm going to hold shift. And we're going to turn it 90 degrees. All right, stay with me. And then we're going to crop it. Get ourselves a nice, good square fireball here. All right, so you should have the fireball with the crop on it. Now we're going to come in, we're going to place it, and we're going to blow this thing up. Now I know what you're saying, Jeremy, how does a fireball equate to alien landscape? Sometimes a brush you use isn't even what the brush is supposed to be. This won't be fire. All right, so once you've got this, right-click on the source, and now hit rasterize. What you've just done is cropped away everything and made this into a flat image. All right, cool. So you got a rasterized source image. Notice that the crop disappeared. Now, let's go to the pixel persona. Hold this, make sure that's selected, and then I'm going to select the sample color. All right, you see here that it did all of the black. The marching ants are around the outside. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the tolerance up here. And why am I doing this? Because I want some larger spaces. You see when I up the tolerance, like right here, what that does? Smaller tolerance, larger tolerance. All right, I'm going to move it up to about 30%. So we'll give it a solid value for those following at home. And then we're going to hit apply. Perfect. Now, with the marching ant still selected, one simple key, delete. All right, perfect. Now, we got this tricky white background. How do we fix a white background in Affinity Designer? We come up to File, we come up to Document Setup, we go to Color, and we click on Transparent Background. Perfect. Now we have fire, and now we have a transparent background. The last thing we do, we deselect. Now we have a fire logo on a transparent background. Now, still in the pixel persona, folks, I come over to Adjustments, and I apply a black and white adjustment to this fire. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn down the reds, I'm going to turn down the yellows a little bit, just a little bit, maybe 30% and 80% respectively. And now the last thing we're going to do, we're going to add one more adjustment. It's going to be what's called a levels adjustment, and you find it here. All right, now what I like to do when I create this is I make the whites about 10% whiter, and I make the blacks about 10% darker, and that gives me some really good funky contrast. All right, so I'm sitting at about 11% and 84%. Good deal. All right, close that out. So your structure should look like this. Your image has a black and white adjustment, and if you wanted to, you could move it to the top so that they're stacked like this, and then there's a levels adjustment. All right, now to create brushes. Remember, brushes are created off PNGs. Let's export to PNG, hit export, and let's call this alien brush texture. For those that are following along and just want to create their brush, that's the PNG where you'll find it. All right, and now to help you guys out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this as alien brush texture as well, so that you guys have my actual work file. So in your downloads, there's the PNG and the actual work file. All right, awesome. So we're done doing the brush. So let's see what time we got here. So now let's go ahead and begin step 2. Let's go ahead and make the brush and make this image. So let's go ahead and we'll create a new file. Now, I'm going to make this about 1500 by 1500. You can make it any size you want. I'm just going to do something that's a little bit bigger. All right, now the very first thing we're going to want to do here, we want to come into the pixel persona. We're going to be doing all of this in the pixel persona. Now, we begin by inserting a pixel layer, because you got to have a pixel layer to put pixels on. And then we're going to come over to our black ink, and we're going to flood fill that rectangle. So make sure black is selected, make sure you have a pixel layer, click your flood fill tool, and then flood fill this. Perfect. Now, we're going to add a new pixel layer, and I'm going to call this background. Okay. Perfect. Good naming structure creates good habits. So now, I need to create the brush. So let's go to brush, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new category, and I'm just going to rename this category Alien Brush. If you have a category you want to put it in, go ahead and find your own category. I'm just going to keep it here for this tutorial. All right, once you do the alien brush, now we have to create a new intensity brush. So let's go ahead, find the alien brush texture file, and hit OK. There's the brush that's created. Now this doesn't look anything like what we want. So we open up our brush options. I blow up the size to around 300. I'm going to leave the accumulation right here, and I'm going to blow up the spacing until we're consistent. I would say the spacing is probably going to be at about 146%, and we're going to hit close. Now, when we do this, we're not going to use this brush as a brush. We're going to use it as this strange alien texture. So let's go ahead and begin with the paintbrush tool. Let's choose a color. Now this color, I'm going to choose something in a green, and I'm going to choose something in kind of a dark green because we want it to be fairly dark at the back. Alright, so there's my RGB values, my HSL values if you guys wanted to follow along. The color of green really doesn't matter. I just want something a little darker. Now, I'm going to blow this brush up. So, I'm going to probably start us right about here. And I'm going to just click once. All right, perfect. Now, we're going to open up a new pixel layer. We're going to name it midground. Now, the midground, we're going to come to our green, and we're going to put in a nicer, lighter type of green. Okay, close out here. And now what I'm doing here is I'm actually creating a little bit of foreground. I'm going to blow my brush up even further, folks, to almost a ridiculous type of level, because I want this to be right about here. And we plop it down there. Perfect. Now, why do I say perfect? Notice what we've just done. I've got background, I've got foreground, and now, well, I got middle ground. Let's create foreground. New pixel layer, foreground. So far we've tapped this brush twice. Now the foreground, we're going to want to almost be darker still because the light that's going to come off that sphere is not going to be reflected there. So maybe we should do the sphere first. So keep that layer. Let's create a new one and let's call it Flare. All right. So now the flare brushes are included in the download. It's the 7th season flare brush. So we're going to go to brushes. I've already got that flare pack. And I'm going to use the flare brush that's in there that I gave you guys. Okay, so I select my brush. I come over here to my paintbrush. I make sure I'm on my layer. And I'm going to choose a bright yellow color because I want this thing to be blown out. This thing is going to be blown out like you wouldn't believe. Now, we're going to raise up, and we're going to keep raising up. I want this thing to be front and center in this bad boy, right? Let's move it even a couple areas higher. Notice I'm at 4,000 pixels, and I think I'm pretty good right there. So right in the center, third mouse click, kapow. Now, let's drop our flare layer behind the midground. That's part of the trick, okay? So we've got our flare layer. Now we need another layer. Let's go ahead and create a layer. We're going to use our round marquee, and I'm going to create a circle because we need a center for this bad boy. And now I'm going to move it to the center of the flare. Now, making sure I'm on the layer, making sure I have my white selected, I'm coming up to my flood fill, and I'm filling that center. Okay, now I make sure I'm still on the layer. I'm coming down to Effect, and I'm going to create a Gaussian blur. All right, probably 54 pixels or so. And now I come up and I deselect. Now we have a nice center point for the flare. So let's go ahead and rename this center point because good naming makes good neighbors, right? So now what we have to do is we have to put in some foreground. So I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to select a color, and I'm going to keep this color again in the green family, and it's going to be pretty dark, right? So I'm going to say I'd almost border it on black. All right, so there's my HSL value if you guys wanted to pay, real close attention. So close this out. Let's create, well, we already created the foreground layer. So make sure foreground's selected. Bring up your brush. Bring up the alien brush again. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to up this thing quite a bit. And now you see how this thing is a little bit darker than what's at the back. I'm going to keep going even a little bit further than that still. I'm going to go down even a little further. All right. And notice what I'm looking at. I'm looking at that contrast here. Now I'm going to go ahead that should work. All right. Now, why did I keep these layers separate? Let's say that I want it in a different area. I can now move this over. If it was in its own dedicated layer, I can do this. If it was part of the other layer, I can't. All right, so I got foreground, midground. Now, I promised you some purple over here. Let's move the midground a little bit over. I think that this is probably where I'm going to want this. Perfect. And now I want to take care of this. So let's go create one more. And let's call this the far background. Okay. I like to put everything on its own layer. I'm very anal retentive about that. Now, we're going to come over here. And I like to put purple down. And I like this purple to be right about there. It's a darker purple, right? Because we don't want it really shining through and looking large and in charge. All right, make sure I'm on that layer. Grab the alien brush again. All right, always the same brushes, man. All right, and now let's pop some of this around here. Okay, perfect. Now, what do we do with this layer? We want to drag it all the way to the back. Okay, good deal. So, that's our layer structure. Foreground, midground, we've got our flare on our center point, background, far background, all on a surface of black. So I think we're in pretty good shape here. Now we start to grab effects. So let's grab our effects panel, because we're going to use this a ton. All right, our layer. The stuff in the background should be the most obscure. So let's go ahead and begin by applying a Gaussian blur to that background. Perfect. And now I'm also going to apply a 3D texture. And when I do that, I might have to readjust my blur a little bit. Okay, and I bring that down. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, if you wanted to decide that you wanted to, say, change that Gaussian blur out and make it really textured, you can do whatever you want to do with it. I'm going to go ahead and leave it just that subtle, because if it's in the background to me, that's really what it should be. All right, so I think that's pretty good. So let's go ahead now and treat this foreground. All right, so I've got this selected. Now let's go ahead and bevel and emboss this thing. So let's make it 3D. That's cool. Okay, let's go 3D. Now, when we go 3D, we can adjust the layer effect. We can then change up the profile a little bit. I think we're in pretty decent shape here, but I am going to add in an ambient color. All right. Cool. And then I'm going to crank up that ambient color a little bit in order to get that 3D effect. This is the trick, folks. This is what provides that. All right, so 3D is on. Now we're going to go through and we're going to put in a little bit of an inner glow. Let's go ahead, and we've got some reflected light there. Okay. Drop that intensity quite a bit there. Okay, and then drop down the opacity a little bit on that. And then I think we're pretty good there. All right, perfect. Now, same thing on this layer. Let's go through, apply the 3D. Now, we've got a little bit of that ambient light coming through, so ambient light, come down, saturation up, down to here, pretty good shape. Let's go ahead and crank up the radius on this just a little bit. All right, good deal. So, I'm pretty happy with that. And now what do you think we're going to do with the background layer, folks? We're going to come down here. We're going to come to the background, like this stuff all the way back here. And then we're going to apply the 3D to that. Perfect. So 3D there. We're going to put a little bit of ambient color in there. Yellow. Saturate. Down the lightness. And now, with this, we're going to go ahead and crank that up a little. Okay. And I think we're pretty good with that. We can keep messing with it a little bit, but I think that we're fairly good with that. All right. So now you can do a lot with this stuff. You can go through and change the opacities. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and really kind of work the blend modes in here. So the mid ground here, we're going to come in here. And we're just going to start playing with blend modes to see what we get, because sometimes you get some really cool effects. I actually really like that one with hue. I think I'm going to keep that. All right, now the background here, let's go ahead and see what we get there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to mess with the blend modes. It's a little too dark. Multiply, darken, no. Ooh, what is that? I wanted to keep the green. Like that. All right, perfect. So that's negotiation on this. And then this one here, let's see what we get. We want this one to be really front and center. That one I might just, oh, that is amazing. All right, we're going to subtract that bad boy. All right, and the last one here, one more. Again, folks, there is nothing you can do with this that you can't undo. I think I'm just going to keep this as kind of my spot of purple. I really like it as it sits. Yeah, we're just going to keep that as normal. All right, folks, so that's how you create the alien background. It really is as simple as using those two brushes, getting good layer structure down, and then playing with the blend modes and the effects in order to create what you're looking to do with that. All right, gang, hope you enjoyed it. This was a bit longer. It's something I usually don't do, but we got a request for it, so I want to give you guys what you want and provide value. All right, this is Jeremy Hazel on behalf of Seventh Season Studios. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, check out our website. There's a ton more coming. All right, we'll see you in the next videos.